Welcome into the Psych with Mike Library. This is Dr. Michael Mahan, and I am here again with Mr. Brett Newcomb.
Yes, good to see you.
I really like that shirt.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I'm buttering you up.
Yeah, I see that, but I don't know why. I'm waiting for the axe to fall.
No, I'm just in a good mood. So that's all it is.
And it's good when people can be in a good mood.
Yeah.
And you know, that's part of what we were talking about last week. We did a podcast on doing versus being, or being versus doing. You know, the conflict that's inherent in that struggle all the time for all of us. And so we spent a lot of time talking about it, and we realized we want to talk about it some more.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, and you know, to be honest, didn't think that I had that much that I wanted to say about it until we actually started talking about it. Then once we started talking about it, I found that, there's a lot more here than I really was aware of thinking about it beforehand. And one of the things that I'm aware of myself is that this concept of mindfulness, which has been recently interjected into the zeitgeist of psychology, while that language may be new, the concept is not.
right.
I mean, I think we've been doing this clinically ever since anybody started trying to help another person deal with their own emotional turmoil.
Yeah. So what's the challenge? I mean, one of the reasons we do these podcasts is to have an opportunity to talk about our clinical perspectives,
Right.
and clinical training
And that was really,
done.
that I felt like we didn't get enough time to do last time.
Yeah. So if I'm approaching a clinical situation with somebody that's miserable in their life, unhappy, angry, depressed, stuck, and I'm trying to approach it from the perspective of saying, well, yeah, but are you mindful? What in the hell do I do with that? How do I bring that to the table? How do I make that reality? I mean, how do I separate it out from the jargon? Psychology is riven with jargon.
Mm-hmm.
But how do I engage a real person in a real conversation about what's hurting in your life? What are the patterns that brought you to this place, so that we can talk about your understanding of that and open a dialogue about whether or not we can change that.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, Viktor Frankl said, if you were living, Viktor Frankl came out of concentration camps in World War II and wrote a book about how to survive. And he said, if you are in an intolerable situation that you have no control over, like being a concentration camp inmate with people that had life or death power over you, telling you what to do every day, how do you survive it?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, if you can't change that reality, you can't get yourself out of there. Then you have to change the way you perceive it or understand it. Otherwise, you won't survive.
Right.
So I think that's where I go in those conversations. Let's talk about the patterns of your life. Let's identify the realities in your life versus the imagined, assumptive thoughts that you have about being stuck or about being victimized. I mean, some people have internalized a victim script, and so they're always screwed by life, no matter what.
And you know, that's heavy, right?
Yeah.
Pathology there, and it doesn't even have to be that bad. One of the things that I was talking about last week was how many couples come in to therapy and they have two different perspectives that are different. They're both valid, and yet they can't resolve anything because neither one of them can move off that perspective. And the same thing applies here. Until somebody is able to reevaluate and see through the other person's perspective, then they're going to remain stuck.
Yeah. And so they have that perspective, much of which is driven by their shoulds. You know, you're my husband. You should do this for me. You should be this person. You should behave this way. And he may even acknowledge it. Yeah, I should, but I don't want to. And so I'm going to be a childlike person and rebel against it or act out in ways that I then say, well, gosh, I don't know. It just happened. Or I can be an adult and say, you know, this isn't working for me. But I don't want to be this boy. I don't want your expectations to define me. I want me to be here and have you choose me.
I'm even aware of thinking about just not a particular situation, but an amalgam of several situations that I've had even recently, where one spouse is saying, look, this is what I want. I want you to be more blah blah, maybe even just more present with our family. And the other person's saying, well, but I want to go and do a thing that is separate from the family because it helps validate me.
Yeah.
And those are two very, very acceptable and valid positions for both of them to have, but they're conflicting.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, how many conversations have we had over the years with married couples where they come in and they're really struggling, and the guy says, she just spends money. I work really hard to make it. I bring it home and she spends it on this crap that I don't think we need, and she won't stop spending it, and she's not spending her time doing what she should do. I go, well, what should she do?
Right.
Well, she needs to cook dinner, and she needs to do the laundry, and she needs to mop the floor. And she says, wait a minute, you son of a gun, I'm working too. I have a job. Who are you to tell me that it's my job to mop the floor? She said, I'll get the floors mopped. I'll hire a maid service. And then he goes into, there you go, spending money. And so they have this power struggle over money. And they can't step back from the heat of the moment to say, what are the patterns? What are we really talking about here? And I've even asked guys, I said, are you really saying that your understanding of the female is that she has to have her hand on the broom? Her hand has to sweep the floor and not just get it done. Is the objective to have the floor clean, or is the objective to see her clean the floor? And he's like, well, I never thought about that. I said, well, you need to think about it, because that's what I'm hearing you say. And if I'm hearing you accurately, if I'm understanding you, then we have a problem, because you're off base.
So going back to the idea of being versus doing, so the she must sweep the floor is a doing perspective.
Absolutely.
The goal of getting the house cleaned is a being perspective.
Living in a home that is clean is a being perspective, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. So if I'm wrong, then you talk to me about that and help me understand the way you see the world.
No, I think that that's 100% accurate. And I think that when I am in that room with, a couple, I think that I'm always trying to think about what is it that makes this couple be, and not what makes them do. And although I've never thought about it in that or applied that language to it, but I think that I do that even when I'm with individual clients. And that's why I think this whole idea of mindfulness, even though that's the popular jargon for the moment, the concept isn't new.
Well, but the biggest issue in therapy for the therapist is getting out of their own way. I bring my crap to the table. I'm in the room. I got stuff going on. I listen to them talk about their marital relationship, and I'm thinking about, well, my wife does that, or I do that, or why not do that? And I have to get out of the way with my stuff so that I can listen and hear accurately and understand their stuff enough to be able to say, okay, this is what I'm hearing. This is the pattern that I'm seeing as the two of you dance in front of me. And I need to know from you, am I got that right? Am I understanding that? Because I can't come, and you were saying off camera, and we've both taught a lot of classes for people that want to be therapists. We've taught at universities for years where that was our job. And I would talk to people about, you can't be an agenda therapist. You can't bring your cause, your passionately embraced cause, into the room and force that onto the client. You have to be there for the client. You have to hear what they're saying and show them the pattern of, okay, as I listen to this, if I'm hearing it accurately, my understanding is you're making a choice, and the choice costs this, and you're unhappy about the price. You're not unhappy about the choice, but you're unhappy about the price. Am I hearing that right? And so if that is the reality in your relationship and you're both unhappy, what options do we have on the table for making different choices? And so that's where I try to go clinically. I don't know how you do that.
Well, obviously I was trained by you, so I do it.
So I know how you should do it.
Mostly the same. But what I wonder is if there is, if that's still being taught that way. I mean, obviously I still teach, but I don't primarily teach in a program that is designed specifically to train people to go out and
Clinical
do
skills.
therapy.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's still the focus of programs that are teaching those individuals, because it seems like to me that we live in a world where while we say we're supposed to be more culturally aware and we're supposed to be value free, it feels like sometimes that in itself becomes an agenda.
Well, it does become an agenda. I mean, I have my values. I can't be value free,
Right,
but I can learn to come into a room and pay attention to you
right,
and not listen to myself.
exactly. And when you talk about, oh, I got to get out of my own way, and
Yeah.
for people who are lay people, and they wouldn't have to know this, but that's the difference between what's called transference, countertransference. We've
Yeah.
talked about that in the past, and we can do show on that at some point. But uh, I think that is the goal for new therapists. Obviously, you and I, who have been doing it for a long time, you probably have yourself trained so that when you go in the room, you're already in that space. You're already just a conduit for hearing what the client is putting in front of you and giving them an honest mirrored reflection of what it is that they are saying.
I sure hope so.
Yeah. And I know, as both of us well enough to know that that's how we operate. But this idea that you have to be persistently aware that you are not applying your values, this idea that is something that needs to be taught, I frankly find that a little bit offensive. Since the inception of counseling, that's been the goal.
Well, I can remember having a number of conversations with therapists that I worked with in a practice, who wanted to present themselves as Christian counselors and promote their own personal understanding of Christianity and the requirements of Christianity in their choices in life, and promote their clients to behave in ways that were consistent with the therapist's understanding of Christian choices. I really am opposed to that. And when people would call me on the phone and say, "Are you a Christian counselor?" I would say, "Well, I'm a Christian and I'm a counselor, but I don't promote a specific doctrinal agenda.
Right.
So I'll listen to you.
Right.
If you're Jewish or Muslim or atheist or agnostic or whatever, come on in, let's talk."
And and we're getting a little bit into the weeds, but at one point you just were a therapist. That's what you did. You were a psychotherapist, and you provided psychotherapy. As we've gone more into this idea of value free and cultural awareness and all this other stuff, mindfulness and everything, and those things have become agendas. Now we have these niches open up where you're an LGBT counselor or you're a Christian counselor, and I'm like, well, but no, why aren't we just counselors?
I think that's more about controlling the marketplace, limiting access to the clients with particular issues to people that have, quote, certifications. I remember years ago being asked to work with a pedophile, and I was really uncomfortable with it. And I said, I don't like pedophiles, kind of like don't like drunks, and I don't want to work with drunks. But I undertook to do that. I agreed going in that I would do that. But I said, I have to make something really clear. I will endeavor to hear you and understand what you're talking about. But if you ever give me cause to know that a child's at risk, I'll report your butt in a heartbeat. And he had to test that. He had to give me that information, and I reported him. And then he was like, "I can't believe you did that." And I said, "I told you." I mean, I will endeavor to get out of my own prejudices enough to try to understand you, to see if I can help you. But I'm not ever going to be a sidekick when you're hurting a child. And that's the way I feel. So as a Christian therapist, I can say, I'll really try to listen to whatever you want to talk about or think about and keep my stuff in abeyance. But if I find that you're doing something that is hurtful to someone, a wife, a child, a husband, whomever, then I'm not going to go down that road with you.
But those are just the basic foundations of confidentiality and when confidentiality has to be breached. I mean, every therapist is bound to report those things and should report those things. My feeling is that if we're all supposed to be practicing this idea of mindfulness and allowing the individual to be whatever it is that they are being, then we're all value free, and that shouldn't be an issue that has to be bandied about or even considered. And I don't know when that happened. I don't know when that became a part of the whole zeitgeist of psychotherapy, that we had to have that as a litmus test.
Well, you had a lot of people coming into the field trying to become therapists in order to promote a particular social agenda. So I want to find this population of people and serve their needs to the exclusion of other populations of people. And that was a discussion that was always going on in the counseling educator circles. How do you train good counselors to have good skills? And do they market themselves as an LGBTQ therapist? I only work with this population. I really understand their issues. And the question, do you reveal to your client, hey, I'm one too, and talk about your relationships, or do you stay in a more neutral and mirroring place where your own identity and your own stuff doesn't come into the room any more than you can possibly keep it out?
And I guess for me, coming back to this idea of what is clinically good for helping people to be able to be rather than do, I just feel very strongly that I am a completely non-biased, non-judgmental observer of human behavior when I'm in that room. Now, obviously, there are limits to that. As you say, if someone were to disclose to me that they were going to harm somebody under the age of 18, somebody over the age of 65, or themselves or another person in a way where they identified that they had a plan and intended to carry out that plan, then obviously I would then take action to try and make sure that those things didn't happen. Those are just the basic foundations of what are called the boundaries of confidentiality. But other than that, I feel like that I am completely non-biased and non-judgmental. People can say to me anything that they want, and I say to them frequently, you can tell me anything you want. I am never going to judge you. I am never, ever, ever going to criticize you or, try and make you feel bad for a choice that you've made. I may tell you that, in my opinion, that seems counter to you being able to be a healthy person, because I feel like that would be my job as the therapist, but I'm not judging the actions. And I think that is absolutely essentially inherent in psychotherapy.
Yeah, the message from you can appropriately be, if you pursue these thoughts and feelings into the realm of behavior, you're putting yourself at risk. And we can talk about the fact that you have them. We can try to understand what they are and where they come from and what choices you might have to find a way to safely, appropriately gratify them. Like a peeping Tom that says, I like to go around the neighborhood and peek in windows and see partially unclothed people. That puts you at risk. If you want to do that, I'm not making a judgment about you personally because you have those fantasies or those desires. But I am asking you, are you having those behaviors? Because if you have those behaviors, you need to understand it comes at a cost that you should be willing to pay.
And even bringing that back to the conversation about that we originally were having about being and doing, and I wouldn't have thought about this in this language prior to us having this conversation, but I would say to that person, that behavior has some inherent value for you. If we can identify what that value is, maybe we can find ways for you to be able to get that payoff in different behavior.
Yeah. So you go back down in the weeds and you talk about the Freudian defense mechanisms and the extension of them as you go up the ladder. And so you talk about compromise defenses. If I have the desire to see naked people that don't necessarily know that I'm looking at them, is there a way that I can do that without putting myself socially at risk or personally at risk? And so with the internet, of course you can. The question may be, without them knowing that I'm seeing them, that may be the payoff. But just to see people that I don't know in those conditions, there are lots of people that put their own webcams up and do that and just put it out there because they want people to see them. So if you can match those people up in their behaviors, so there's no social consequences that either one of them has to pay for, then maybe that's the way to go.
And, I would even say, okay, so this person has this desire to peep in the window, and I would argue that it isn't about seeing people scantily clad, that it's really about the thrill of doing it without them knowing and not getting caught.
Yeah.
And so how could you get that behavior met in a way that didn't put you at that kind of social risk?
And that's the question. Can it be done?
Right.
And if so, how? Because if you continue to do it on an impulsive basis or an obsessive basis, the way that you are doing it, and so then we had the conversation about the mechanics of the behavior, and we've gotten away from the value judgment about, ooh, that disgusts me personally. I mean, how can you be that kind of a person that you should be ashamed?
Right.
And it comes back to that whole doing versus being conversation that we had last week about shame, about remorse, about guilt,
right,
where there are controlling scripts that are imposed on you by society.
And I've worked with many people who have what appears to be pretty significant pathology. And when we get to the heart of what the payoff is, and now that we've actually fleshed this out a little bit, the payoff is the essence of being. And the behavior is the essence of doing.
Okay.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so if we identify what the payoff is and we recognize what is the essence of being, then that opens up a floodgate of possible alternatives for behavior that you may not, the doing part of it, that you may not feel like is good for you, or you are being told is not safe for you. And in being able to get that being met, satisfied in ways that would be more socially appropriate or even socially desirable. And there are a lot of ways that a person could do that. You could find many ways of being able to get that satisfaction of doing something.
You know what? Hopefully. Right. I mean, we discuss those options.
Right. But what if you took flowers to somebody's door and rang the doorbell?
It's an interesting proposition. You could offer it and say,
and you don't know, right?
Behavior.
Exactly. You don't know whether or not that would work. But what if it did? And I certainly think that it could potentially satisfy that same kind of being.
Well, we were having a discussion again off camera, because we can't ever shut up and stop talking.
That's true.
About people that are depressed and stuck in a place, and they say, I have no energy, I can't do anything. And one of the conversations that I try to have with them is, can you get out of your own way? Can you do something for someone else? Look around, see something. Is there a widow lady in your neighborhood? Can you cut her grass?
Right.
Can you take her to the grocery store? Can you take a food basket to a food center and say, give this to somebody that's hungry? I mean, are there things that you could do for someone else? Because I think you're too self-absorbed.
And I was just going to say, and for me, a lot of what I think that you and I both preach is that selflessness is the antidote to self-absorption.
Well, it's an antidote. It's not the antidote, because we don't want to lock them into one track.
Yeah, that's a very good distinction. Okay, I hope that was helpful. Actually, this was very helpful for me. So if it wasn't helpful for anybody else,
it was
very helpful for me. So as always, the music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. Please check us out on YouTube. You can search Psych with Mike. If you go to YouTube and check out the videos there, please like and subscribe. That's very beneficial for us. And for Brett and I, if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.